All right, let's try that again. I just had to turn off a recording because Finn started to bark. So it is Friday, May 22nd, and today you are reading chapter 22. We're taking a big jump away from chapter 13, which was yesterday. And so I'm not going to do all of these notes, but I took notes for you guys to help you with what you might have missed. Really briefly, chapter 14, 15, and 16 is Tom in the palace. And Tom is still in the palace, and he is starting to actually kind of get his feet wet, if you will, or he's kind of starting to learn the ropes of things. And so there is a character called Lord Hertford, and Lord Hertford kind of helps him through that. So when Tom does something that maybe he shouldn't, like Lord Hertford would grab his arm like, no, don't do that. And what we're starting to see is that Tom has a really, really kind heart. And so the things he's hearing about laws or punishments that people are going to incur, he thinks they're like really strict and really strong. Because if we had time and we were together in class, we would be going over some of the crazy laws that existed in Tudor England. And so you can tell the character of Tom is starting to be like, these are ridiculously strict and severe punishments for things that they shouldn't be punishing people for. So he's starting to get a bit of a understanding of he knows what it was like to be a beggar, but he's starting to see from the other side that there isn't really a need for these laws. And one of the things that a character he meets is really important is his name is Humphrey Marlowe. And Humphrey Marlowe is Tom's whipping boy. And a whipping boy is somebody, because the king, his body is sacred. He cannot actually, at this point in time, if a child was, not a good kid or done something wrong, they might get a beating from their parents. Well, they can't do that to the king, but they still need to punish him for when he is bad or doesn't do well in his lessons. And so they have a kid named Humphrey Marlowe, who's his whipping boy. And that is the kid who receives the spankings, if you will, or something to that effect. And so what Humphrey Marlowe's actually really nervous about is now that Tom is king, well, Edward, actually Tom is king, he's really worried about losing his job. It's an actual job, it's a position, and he earns money for it. And so Tom, with his kind heart, actually says, no, don't worry, you can have this position for the rest of your life, but I'll make sure that they go easy on you. So what we're starting to see is that Mark Twain is really showing us that the Tudor England and royalty is needing somebody with a kind heart and a kind hand. And so that is what Tom is starting to learn and to show. And that's the exact same thing, because in chapter 17 and 18 and 19, actually, the rest of the chapters are Edward as Tom. And Edward is learning the exact same thing. He's just learning it from a different perspective. He is now getting the perspective of a beggar, a pauper, a poor person, and why and how some of the laws that exist in Tudor England are terrible and they're way too severe. And so one of the big things that Edward learns, because he spends some time with John Canty and John Canty's gang of thieves, and what he learns is that there are two kinds of people who are criminals, or two kinds of people who commit crimes. There are some that are forced into a life of crime because they have no other options. And that is so he meets people who are they are forced into it. They had to steal or something to feed their family. And then there's the other kind of person, which is like John Canty, who chooses to live a life of crime. That is, he's actually just a bad guy who wants to be a criminal, versus somebody who is forced into that life. And so he starts to think maybe I should have a different type of punishment for people who clearly have no other options and they are kind of forced into it, versus people who are hardened lifelong criminals. And so you start to see Edward, through his experiences as Tom, he's starting to get a lot of empathy. He's starting to feel very strongly with the lower classes. All right, I'm skipping a bunch, but that's the biggest theme that Mark Twain is showing us, is that they're both getting these lessons about how to be a kinder and more gentle person through their experiences of somebody else's life. The other thing that kind of is important is in chapter 20. Edward is kind of on the run. He is avoiding the gang of thieves, but he's also trying to get back to Miles Hendon. Remember, Miles Hendon was that nice man who used to be a knight, and it does not think that Edward is actually king. He thinks Edward's kind of crazy, but he really likes him and he wants to take care of him. So Edward's trying to get his way back to Miles Hendon, and he stumbles across a hermit. And I don't know if you know what a hermit is, but a hermit is somebody who chooses to live off by themselves. You know, like a hermit crab, like lives by itself in its shell. Well, a hermit is somebody who chooses to seclude themselves from society and just live off by themselves, and they don't really like people. He encounters this hermit, and this hermit, because Edward says, "I am Edward, King of England," the hermit believes him immediately. He goes, "Oh, hello, Your Majesty." And this is ironic, and this is one of those things that we wanted to come back to, we haven't really been able to, is the irony that we shortly, like through their interactions, we start to learn that the hermit is clearly insane. And so it's ironic that we realize that since the hermit is insane, similarly, everybody who thinks Edward is actually king, they think he's insane. So it's kind of ironic that the one person who believes Edward that he's actually king is himself insane. And like this brings up this really cool theme that I've always found to be really interesting personally. It comes up in literature as well, but it definitely comes up in like sci-fi and fantasy. And I'm actually watching a show that kind of has to do with time travel right now. And Twain is kind of suggesting this idea, Mark Twain, our author, that madness isn't always necessarily a bad thing, because sometimes it allows people to see and accept truth that more sane people would be unwilling to do so. And so it's like this kind of cool idea that sometimes an insane thing happens to you, or in sci-fi, fantasy, fiction, literature, sometimes an insane thing happens to a character, and the only people who actually believe them are somebody who are in themselves insane. And so it's just an interesting theme that I just wanted to bring up, that this idea that in a crazy world, sometimes the only people who can understand you are others who maybe others would think are crazy. So it's something that comes up in literature, especially sci-fi and fantasy, that nobody's going to believe that you traveled through time unless there's somebody who's crazy enough to believe you, even when it's really the truth. So finally, we learn as not only that the hermit is crazy, but also he kind of has more nefarious purposes. And nefarious means evil, dark, dastardly. Now, the hermit was a priest, a Catholic priest. And if you remember back to our notes, King Henry VIII really wanted to divorce his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, because she wasn't giving him a male heir. And so he started the Church of England, which that put the priests in the Catholic faith out of the job, because now it was no longer the state religion. And so this hermit used to be a happy, healthy person who lost his job and lost his livelihood because of this. And he has a vendetta against King Henry VIII. And so when he finds out that this is Edward, the king, of course he believes it, he is going to he's going to get his revenge on King Henry VIII and Edward wants to get rid of Edward. Okay, so he has him prisoner, and in chapter 21, Edward is worried that he's not going to be able to escape, and then Miles Hendon, who has been following around looking for him, shows up. But as Miles Hendon is outside, not yet gone in to see that Edward is prisoner there, Hugo from the Gang of Thieves and John Canty somehow burst into the hermit's lair, his shack, his place of living, and steal Edward back. And so that's where we are right now. A lot has happened. The biggest thing that happens is that we see these two young boys, Edward and Tom, coming to grips with kind of the more adult ideas of like, what does it mean to be a criminal? What does it mean to punish people for crimes? who all deserves to be punished, what kind of punishments. Are the laws that currently exist in England in 1545, 1547, are they just? When I say just, I mean, are they fair? And so both Tom and Edward are starting to kind of think of these ideas, and Twain is really prompting us to think about what is fair and what is good in those laws. And the other thing that's kind of a background to all of this is, remember I said that Mark Twain is writing for an American audience, and we don't have royalty here. We don't have kings. We don't have queens. And so some of the other things that Mark Twain brings up is they show kind of the over-the-top splendor that the king gets, and it contrasts a lot with the lower classes. And so Tom and Edward are both realizing that maybe they need to help the lower classes more. So we left off in chapter 21 that Edward has just been rescued from the crazy hermit, and he's been rescued, out of the frying pan into the fire is a phrase, which means you're out of one bad situation, but now you're thrown right into another one. So yes, he's away from the hermit, he's rescued, but he's still in the hands of the gang of thieves. And that is what we'll leave off at. Today you're reading chapter 22 and filling out the reading guide questions. And then remember, Monday is Memorial Day. Woo-woo. Find some way to think of those that have come before us, and spend some time in memory thinking of those that have passed on in your life. And Tuesday, that's in your packet. That's chapter 25. So on Tuesday, we're going to do chapter 25, and our new week is going to start next Wednesday. Okay? That's all I have. And if you have questions, send me a message. Also, thank you for stopping writing paper on the public comments. I'm okay with funny public comments. I'm okay with jokes on puns based on what our reading is. I'm not okay with just silliness. All right. So if you would like to be unmuted, just have to reach out to me and have that conversation with me via Google Chat or email. But yeah, keep doing your work, keep turning stuff in, and we've got 1 week left, people, just one. And we're going to have some opportunities for some other work to do on June 1st, that flex day, just like some fun stuff toward the end of the year. And I look forward to hearing from you in conferences in a couple weeks. But yeah, chapter 22 today. And sorry, this is a bit of a long video. We just skipped a huge chunk, so I wanted to make sure we got to it. All right, I will talk to you guys on Tuesday. Have an awesome extra weekend, and I hope you are spending it safely with family and friends, as well, the friends you can't be with, I guess. All right, bye.